Okay, so Laura Louise warned you that there are some sad teen stories. I'm going to be one of those sad teen stories. So in the summer of 1999, when I was 14 years old, I lost my virginity to a 16-year-old boy who I had just met that night. Or at least, I think that was the first time we had met. In the summer before high school started, I used to spend a lot of time hanging out at this park by my house where a group of older boys would go to smoke and get high. I knew one of the boys. He was the youngest son of my old babysitter, and so I sort of had this in. Although, in retrospect, I don't really know how much of an in I needed when it came to hanging out with a bunch of horny high school boys. But I was still in my awkward adolescent years, and I wasn't unattractive, but I wasn't the conventional kind of pretty that would have made me a popular cool girl. I was the kind of girl who had crushes on all of the popular boys, and then to let it all out, I would go home after school and write poems called, "If You Were With Me Instead." Which I don't need to tell you what those are about. The title speaks for itself. But in the summer going into grade 9, I was starting to come out of my awkward adolescence just enough to be the object of desire. And I was desperate for any kind of attention. So I would go to this park night after night and hang out, and these older boys would get me really, really stoned. And so one night, one of them grabs my hand and leads me into the woods bordering the park. All I really remember is sitting on his lap, and then I remember him being inside of me. And then within a couple of minutes, I must have said no or done something. I don't really remember what, if I got up and just put my pants back on and walked out. Now, I continued to see him a couple of times more after that. Let's face it, he was cute and cool and was basically the first boy to show me any amount of attention since my grade 6 boyfriend, who French kissed me on a school trip, and I was so horrified that I broke up with him the following day. It was okay. It turned out in high school that he was gay, so it was all fine. I didn't have to worry about traumatizing him. But anyways, so this boy, I'll just call him JT, would come to my house late at night with a couple of his friends, and I would sneak out of my house all stealth-like, except my dad totally knew what was going on, and I got grounded a lot. But I would sneak out, and we would go pool hopping. There were a lot of times where I would hang out with JT in his parents' basement, which of course was darkly lit, and we would try to have sex again. But each time I would stop after a couple of minutes, it hurt, and something didn't feel right. And I didn't know why I was having this bad feeling until many, many, many years later. So shortly after all of this was happening, before grade 9 started officially, I found out that JT had a girlfriend. And she was not happy that I was hanging out with her boyfriend. But even more devastating than this was finding out shortly after that JT had started to tell everyone that we were having sex. Now, when you're a teen, news spreads pretty fast. But when you grow up in the suburbs, gossip like this spreads faster than the fictional airborne virus in the 1995 classic Outbreak, starring Dustin Hoffman and Morgan Freeman. So within a matter of days, my 2 best friends from elementary school basically broke up with me, saying they wanted to be popular now, and they couldn't be popular with me as a friend. What was shocking was not so much the betrayal, but the fact that they actually cared about being popular. Because all through elementary school, we were sort of on that cusp line of not being totally picked on and sort of quasi-accepted by the popular kids, but that was never really a thing that we desired. And so it really came as a shock to me when our friendship ended because of this reason. A couple of years later, before high school ended, I would receive phone calls from both of them crying and apologizing. And I would forgive them, but we were never friends after that. So here I am, 14, friendless, and entering high school, aka the worst years of one's life ever. I would walk down the halls and I would hear people I barely knew or didn't know at all whisper, "Slut." Some were even so bold as to yell whore from across the hallway, and everyone would turn and look at me, knowing that I was the person they were talking about. But what was worse than the slut shaming was the threats from other girls at my high school. I had slept with someone who had a girlfriend. I was a homewrecker. Although, what kind of home do two teenagers have? This is a great question. And I was going to have to pay for it. Luckily, these threats never manifested into anything more than just threats, but they were constant throughout my first year of high school. I feel really grateful that, in 1999, no one really used the internet for more than AOL chat rooms, and so after school, I was able to go home and escape all of this torment and feel safe again. The only response that I could think of to these allegations was to lie, to say no, it didn't happen. It was my word against his, and of course, his word mattered more. But the lie felt like the only thing I had, and so I held to it. Years later, for reasons I will never understand, JT decided to tell everyone that we had never had sex. But by that point, the damage had been done. So here I am now in grade 10, and I have managed to make some new friends who don't care whether or not I've had sex with this person, and I make it through high school. It's not until I go to university and learn about a little thing called feminism that I start to realize that there's something not entirely right about my "this is how I lost my virginity" story. But I still couldn't quite figure out what that was yet. I never felt bad about the way that I lost my virginity. The whole romantic story of losing your virginity to your best friend in his bedroom while his parents are away or asleep, it never really had much appeal to me. I sort of knew that losing your virginity was the most awkward experience ever, no matter how you slice it. And so, the way things happened didn't really bother me. It wasn't until, though, I hit my mid-20s and started to read more about rape culture that I started to wonder if what had happened to me was really consensual or not. So let's think about it. A bunch of guys who are older get a girl high, one of them takes her into the woods. Sounds pretty bad, right? But when I say I don't want to do this anymore, they listen. And I continue to see them after the event, so it can't be rape, can it? But as anyone who knows anything about trauma will tell you, our responses to sexual assault, rape, or violence are never straightforward. And if the Giangameshi trials have taught us anything, it's that women will continue to see the perpetrator even after the crime. So where does that leave me then? What exactly do I call this thing that has happened to me? I still don't quite know what to call it. Rape doesn't entirely feel right to me, and it sort of exists in this kind of gray zone that I feel like we don't quite have words for yet. So here we are, and I'm feeling really grateful that 17 years after losing my virginity, we've come a long way in terms of the kind of conversations we're having about these experiences. And yet, at the same time, I feel like we have a long way to go. As someone who studies teen girls for my dissertation, I can't help, though, but feel really excited for the kinds of conversations that are happening right now. While the internet has made slut-shaming a 24-hour phenomenon, it has also opened up spaces for girls anywhere to learn about consent and to learn about rape culture. I think of spaces like Rookie Magazine, and I feel a lot of hope. I think of the teen girls who have pushed and worked so hard to get consent to be a part of their sex ed curriculum in their high schools. I think about the teen girls who showed up to school in crop tops and short shorts with bra straps showing in order to protest the ways in which high school dress codes perpetuate rape culture instead of prevent it. I've been trying and struggling as someone who always likes to end things on a positive, happy note to figure out how to wrap up this story. Can there be a silver lining to this? Yes, I am here now, I am fine. This event did not rule my life, although it certainly had its impact. But yeah, something doesn't feel right about trying to wrap this sad story up in a happy little bow. So instead, what I want to do is end with pointing you guys to my new favorite tattoo, which is here on my calf. And you might be able to see it as a little skunk friend. And it says, "It's okay if it's not okay." I recently got this tattoo because I had been experiencing a high level of anxiety. I've struggled with severe anxiety my whole life. And so on a good day, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go and get this tattoo because it's really hard for me to just be okay with things not being okay. Sometimes we need to sit with the sadness and not try to change it into something that it's not. And so I want to end my story today by saying, it's okay if it's not okay. Thank you.